What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we are going to be looking at some Keyforge cards. You see, I want to do a big deep dive into Keyforge, but there's no deck building in Keyforge. I might have mentioned this once or twice. So I thought what we need to do is get some themes going for our videos. So what we're going to do is start looking through the houses and looking at some of the themes of the houses and the different cards that they've got. No, you cannot put these into your deck whenever you want, but what you can do is look out for these. And when you open a deck and you have a look through, hopefully through the series of videos we're starting today, you will have a good sense of what these cards do, which ones to look out for, and how you can go about having fun with them. So I thought what we do today is start off by looking at Mars and their tendency to do what I like to term cheeky damage. Cheeky damage, as I define it, is any damage which is done outside of a standard attack. And by my count, and I'll probably have to correct myself at the end when I realise I've counted wrong, there are 8 Mars cards that do cheeky damage. And look, sometimes this is super important. So in a bunch of my decks that I've opened, there are this, and you end up sitting opposite something like an Ember Imp. An Ember Imp's only got 2 power, it's not some kind of giant powerhouse card, but I can only play 2 cards per turn while Ember Imp's on the field. I really want to get rid of Ember Imp, but what if I sit down opposite 2, 3, 4 Ember Imp? I'm not just going to be able to attack and get rid of them, and if I am, it's going to take a blooming long time to get rid of them. One of the decks I have has 2 Tentacus in. Now, Tentacus has 5 power, which is not to be sniffed at, but also Tentacus has a permanent skill whereby your opponent must play you an Ember in order to use an artifact, which means if both Tentacus hit the field, and yes, that does happen, you got to pay 2 Ember to use an artifact. Very few artifacts are good enough to pay 2 Ember every single time you ever want to use them. No, ladies and gentlemen, this is not good. So what we need to do is try and take them out, and you can attack them, but it's better if you don't. And Mars is a good house for cheeky damage. So let's have a look, shall we? So starting off, we'll go through the actions first. It's not particularly important which order we go in, to be honest. So let's just start off with the actions. And the first one we've got here, Ammonia Clouds. Now this one is a big risk-reward thing. Deal 3 damage to each creature. That is every creature on the field, yours and your opponent's. The way you can tell is quite simply, if it says friendly creature, then it affects yours. If it says something like non-friendly creature or your opponent's creatures, it affects them. But if it just says creature, it is both yours and your opponent's. As an extra quick ruling here, I have double-checked this, and this is definitely correct. If a character has armor, it will protect from cheeky damage unless specifically mentioned otherwise. So if we look at something like Champion Anathiel, for instance, which has 1 armor, then Ammonia Cloud would do 2 damage. But if there's a Bulwark next to it, which gives its neighbor 2 more armor, then it's got 3 armor, and actually Ammonia Clouds will do absolutely nothing. But this is 3 damage. It's very good, and you've got to be careful when you play this. You can't just be dropping it willy-nilly, but what you can do is drop it when your opponent's got more creatures out than you. The reality is that Mars creatures are not the most powerful. In fact, I did some maths here, and it turns out that there are 18 Mars creatures, 11 of which have 3 power or less. So Ammonia Clouds can just wipe your board of Mars creatures very quickly. You need to be kinda careful. Still sticking in the actions here, we see Irradiated Ember. Now what's awesome about Irradiated Ember is that it's got an Ember bonus. You play it, you get an Ember, that's quite nice. And if your opponent has 6 Ember or more, you deal 3 damage to each enemy creature. There we go. I told you it would be clear if it was your opponent. Here we have enemy creature only. You're dealing 3 damage to them, not to you. Now, this is where your opponent's got 6 or more Ember, But do remember that your opponent needs 6 Ember to forge a key. So another way to read this is, if your opponent is ready to forge a key next turn, do 3 damage to each of their creatures. I mean, clearly this is better than Ammonia Clouds, because it gives you an Ember bonus and it does 3 to your opponents but not to you. Then again, it is far, far less likely to actually be usable, but because you can only play it on some turns. It is not an every turn kind of thing. We have Mothership Support, which does give you an Ember bonus here. And what Mothership Support does, it's an action. And for each friendly ready Mars creature, you deal 2 damage to a creature. So if you've got 4 friendly ready Mars creatures, they've got to be ready, they cannot be exhausted. If you've just played them down and they're exhausted, or you've used them, no deal. Or they've just played us at the beginning of your turn and you're fine. And you can redirect it however you want. So if there is a Tentacus in play and you've got 3 ready friendly Mars creatures, well, you can just direct all 3 lots of 2 damage at Tentacus and knock them out. But similarly, if your opponent's got 3 Ember Imp, you can just get rid of all 3 Ember Imp. Quite similar, but different in effect by a little bit, we've got Orbital Bombardement. That also has an Ember bonus. And when you play, you reveal any number of Mars cards from your hand. For each card revealed, you deal 2 damage to a creature. And just like with Mothership Support, you can essentially pick the same creature multiple times. And obviously, as with everything in Keyforge, it all depends on what you actually get in your deck. But this works so well with Ganymede Archivist. Now, I've actually got a deck that's got 3 of these in. And luckily, it also has 2 Orbital Bombardment. Don't believe me? Here's the deck list. It's called Ingman Bazaar Moderator, and it might be the best deck I've got. And what you can do here is try and use Ganymede Archivist to constantly reap, and every time you reap, you archive a Mars card. Then you have a Mars turn. You pick all of your Mars cards up from your archive, and then you go absolutely nuts with Orbital Bombardment. If you can go and archive 5, 6, 7 Mars cards, and Ganymede Archivist is a great way to do so, you can then have 7 or 8 Mars cards in hand, and when you use Orbital Bombardment, it's great. If you want to stash cards, stash them in your archive, bring them out, go nuts. I don't get it working every game, but on the games I do, it's wonderful. Now, there are also a couple of characters we can use here with Mars to do cheeky damage, one of the best of which is Qyxxlyx Plague Master. I don't know how to pronounce these Mars cards' names. 3 power is fine, but it's not very high. But when you fight or reap, you deal 3 damage to each human creature. It cannot be prevented by armor, which is huge. This is awesome. Now, it's any human creature, which means any human creatures you control, any human creatures your opponent controls. You know, if they're human, look at something like Grey Monk, for instance. You can see there it's clearly identified as a human. Also, Grey Monk's got 3 power, so that's getting destroyed. It's kind of cool. It can be risky. Again, this depends on your board state when you play it. This can get rid of a whole bunch of your characters as well, so you've got to be a little bit careful. We've also got YXIO. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. These cards are hard to pronounce. Again, 3 power is largely uninspiring, but every time you fight or reap, you deal 2 damage to a creature, which is nice. But if you destroy that creature, you get to purge it. Now, remember, fight abilities only resolve if you survive the fight, and with 3 power, you're not always going to survive the fight, so this is largely a better creature to reap with, rather than fight. But you reap, you get your Ember, you deal 2 damage to a creature, hopefully you destroy it, and it gets purged. Purged means he gone. It's gone for the game, it ain't coming back. Or as the rulebook states it so nicely, when a card is purged, it is removed from the game and placed face down beneath its owner's identity card. Purged cards no longer interact with a game state in any manner. That's pretty clear. And then we have one other card we need to look at here. It is an upgrade. It is Red Planet RAYGUN. Once again, we see an Ember bonus, which is lovely. This creature gains Reap. So when you reap, you gain a skill. Choose a creature, Deal 1 damage to that creature for each Mars creature in play. Again, if we read this literally as we're supposed to, that is yours and your opponent's ready or exhausted. Which is important, of course, because you reap, you get exhausted. If it was only ready creatures, I don't believe you'd get the extra damage there. But it doesn't matter. So essentially here, quite nicely, if you can get a lot of Mars creatures out, Red Planet Raygun deals a whole bunch of damage. The key is, it's all got to go to the same creature, as opposed to something like Mothership Support or Orbital Bombardement, where you can spread the damage around multiple creatures. And I did tell you I was going to miscount, ladies and gentlemen. Clearly that's 7, not 8. I love Mars and its cheeky damage. I've been lucky in some of the decks. I've been playing around with a bunch of these cards, and it really is making a difference in the game. And I thought, right, if we're going to start doing themed videos, I think Mars and cheeky damage is the way to go. But ladies and gentlemen, it's over to you now. Tell me what you think about these cards, and also give me some ideas for future videos. Maybe it's Shadows and Stealing Ember. I don't know. Let me know a house and a theme that you'd like me to explore, and we'll do that video soon. But for now, make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where I talk about games. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.